Good morning, colleagues, people of Guam. It is a little bit after 10. It's 10:02. The Committee of the Whole have returned from recess. We're back in order. We left yesterday afternoon with the question asking the body. We have two different amounts for the general fund. We're on page 3. I'm going to ask the body if there's a motion to adopt the first amount, which was offered by the administration, which is $637,111,951 million. Is there a motion to adopt that general fund amount? The amount, Senator Shelton, is $611,951 million general fund. Is there a motion to adopt that amount to use as a basis? It's on page 3, folks. Let's stay focused, okay? We're on page 3. You look at total general fund. It's on your booklet. It started with 630, but yesterday the promotion was for additional $7 million. All right, there being no motion, so then that's that. Turn on your mic so I can hear you, and everybody else can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to confirm, did you say the motion was to increase that by $7 million?
My question was, there was two amounts that was addressed yesterday. They added an additional $7 million to what we, the Bureau, the Office of Finance and Budget, my office promoted, okay, on Bill 282-35 LS. Our amounts was $630,111,951. Okay? The administration's offer was what they proffered was $7 million more. I'm only asking the question: is there a motion to adopt the 637? And if not, then we can move on to the next amount. We need to, my colleagues, we need to know what amount we're going to be working with. We're not a special fund, so don't ask about special funds. Let's focus on general fund. We need to know what amount we're dealing with so we know how to move forward. Because if we don't know what amount we're working with, when we get past the special funds and we get into the agencies, we won't know what amount we're dealing with. And we're not going to keep going back from page 11, 12, 15 to page 1. Okay? So let's do one step at a time so that there's no mistake. Madam Speaker, you have a question.
Maybe try to find a justification and seeing how we can move forward on this is as we look at this bill today, I know that there's the bond refinancing component here, and the budget projects and realizes savings from the refinancing of bonds for both GMH.
Madam Speaker, we haven't got to special funds to deal about bonds.
So I'm bringing a vision in,
all right,
Mr. Chair, so that if we're looking to look at the increase of the $7 million, then I'm giving a perspective that we can at least talk about. So if you can afford me that opportunity, is just to look at the perspective of, again, realizing that this budget, in this budget, it projects that realizing savings from refinancing of the bonds from GMH and JFK. And while I understand the interest rates are lower right now, these have yet to have public hearings. And we will be saving money by refinancing. And in order to make good on our bond covenants and maintain our bond ratings, shouldn't we project it as if the bonds are not yet refinanced, and once we realize savings, we can appropriate them later? So again, if I'm looking at having to work on a justification, and maybe the conversation of moving notwithstanding, then I'd like to hear it from the body. So that could be a justification for me to consider accepting the revenues as purported. So
All right.
That's something I'm willing
Okay,
to look at.
thank you.
And if Ed Byrne or somebody can see where I'm going with this, that might be something that we can look at.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, I withdraw my request for a motion. Hold on now, Speaker. So I'm consistent, there's no amendment in place. I'm only going to ask the body, because it's in the Budget Act, the budget bill we presented to you. Everyone has a copy. Never mind about the 7, because there's no amendment, okay? So let me just wash that away first. I need to ask the body if they're accepting or adopting the general fund revenue amount available for appropriation that's in your hands. You don't have it in your hands? You don't have your budget?
There's no motion for that, Mr. Chair.
There was an
so
objection to
So-
the motion.
Okay.
There's no
Okay, so-
motion.
There was an objection earlier
Right.
with Senator Moylan, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and that's why I withdrew
on the
that motion.
proposal as presented.
Got it?
And based on yesterday's conversation and presentation, Mr. Chair, if I may, that based on the presentation and the justification, whether it be 630 million total general fund or 637. And this morning, I was going to ask Mr. Byrne or Daphne, realizing that presentation, that maybe that was something that we can reconsider. So I'm just, again,
All right, thank you,
being
Speaker.
fair.
I got you. Senator Tello, you have something? Otherwise, we'll move to the next line on page 3. All right? Senator Therese, we're on page 3. We're moving to line 11 or 12 under the special funds.
All right. I just wanted to run this by OFB and DOA one more time. If the executive order, if we need to put out money in order to extend the unemployment benefits, and we need to come up with $30 to $40 million, I mean, an increase of $7 million is not really going to get us very close to that. Did you have any other recommendations of how we might address that? Do we have enough CARES money left, Mr. Byrne, that could address that we could use for that purpose?
Senator, the CARES Act budget was submitted to the legislature, I think like 2 months ago. There was no money in that for this particular purpose, so all the money that is available is budgeted. So that would have to be rebudgeted if that was the intent, to pay that amount of money, but it's such a large proportion of the total CARES Act money, and I don't think we're alone in that, having that issue. And indeed, those states that have spent a much higher proportion of their CARES Act money, probably in support of their own unemployment funds, are going to have the same problem. So the short answer is no, there's not money.
All right, thank you. Mr. Guerrero, did you have anything else, any other options for us for that money, if we needed to come up with it, the 30 to 40 million?
Senator, looking at the budget right now and basically what we're tracking, I think it would be very difficult to utilize any general fund revenues for that purpose. But, because of the provision that allows states and territories to utilize other resources, including federal assistance money that has already been awarded to them, that is an option. I don't know how much or what the balance is of that, but I can't think of anything else right now that would be able to be afforded to use as the local match.
All right.
That we spent.
And so the governor was on the radio saying that if we don't provide this additional $7 million, we're going to be shortcutting public safety and health care. And the public safety, I think they were talking about the shortage for customs because of their special fund. do you think without the 7 million, we adequately take care of customs in this budget, Mr. Guerrero?
What I will say, Senator, is that the 775 million that we are proposing in Bill 282, I believe is adequate. I think we've covered all the necessities and mandates required by law. There may be other areas and programs which the governor may feel that are underfunded, but at least from our stance is that I think we've adequately covered the necessary requirements
All right.
to continue the government afloat.
Okay, so do you say that also for the shortfall in public health that the governor says would result in not adopting an additional 7 million in revenue? What are the shortages in public health that she's referring to?
I'm not quite too sure what they're referring to as shortfall, but whatever we've allocated to public health, I think is equitable, how we've done the allocation across the board. And if they are indeed short in certain areas, then we may have to address that later on, hopefully with the availability of additional revenues. But at least for what revenues we have projected to be generated in 2021, I think we did the best we can right now in terms of the allocation.
All right, it looks like your OFB projections for GMH are higher, if I'm reading that correctly, but BBMR is projecting more for behavioral health, for example, and then BBMR is projecting less for MIP.
Senator
Yeah.
Therese, if you're going to start talking about the different agencies, then wait until we get to that point.
Well, just generally, I just
Okay.
want to know if they agree with the governor's statement that we are shortcutting public health by not adding 7 million more dollars.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, Senator, the allocation is based on what we felt was the levels for each respective departments and agencies. As we move forward in 2021, priorities may change, additional revenues may become available, and then maybe we can address whatever shortfall there is at the time. But I think for now, I think they're pretty much adequately funded.
All right, Mr. Byrne, did you have any comment on that?
There are a number of programs that are endangered by not adding the 7 million that the administration feels is necessary to add to the revenues, including public health.
Can you elaborate on which programs? Do you have a list that you could provide to us?
I think we're going to cover that when we get to public health, but an example would be the amount appropriated for MIP is effectively being funded by reduction in public health operations. But I'm sure we'll cover that in greater detail when we get to public health.
Yes, the issue is that after we've adopted the revenues, as the chair has stated, we may not be able to come back and address those. So I just want to know ahead of time. Yeah, so you're saying not enough money is allocated to MIP to cover health insurance at this point?
No, Senator. What I said was that the amount that's included in MIP, the additional funds were funded by a reduction in the operations of public health.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My colleagues, as we move along from page 3 all the way to until we complete chapter 1, then we'll have the opportunity to adopt the total general revenue. So if you wanted to add it then, you can add it then. Okay? We're on page 3. We have, I'll have the OFB go over the amounts. Senator Teller, did you have a question, or we took care of that? Senator Lee, I think I took care of the issue you wanted to address earlier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. It was just a point of order, and we've dispensed with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, I'll have the Director of Office of Finance and Budgeting. My colleagues, we do have Mr. Carlson and Ms. Mendiola on the phone. They're live, so if there's any question to be asked of them, as we move along, we're on page 3. Steve, you ready? You're gonna go over?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Senator
I
Kelly,
had
I
a question for
apologize.
page 2, so
Page
before
2?
we move on to page 3?
Okay, are we on the general revenue or are we talking about special funds?
No, the general revenue,
Okay,
since there had been some questions and points brought up. So I just wanted to ask OFB, from the planning perspective, which is what we're doing, we discussed this somewhat last budget. Is it a better planning strategy to consider that a bill might be passed or that additional higher revenues might be achieved? Is it better to plan for those possibilities and allocate it to those agencies so that they are then working it into their budget and dependent on it? Or is it a better planning strategy to take a conservative approach, and if we do end up with any additional monies, to then reassess the budget and allocate from there?
Senator, I'm inclined to do the latter simply because it's a more safe approach in the event that things don't materialize as we all hope and intend it will. Because, as you said, should we generate more than what is actually allocated or appropriated, or what would even projected, there's always that avenue of going back and appropriating those things for those programs and departments that would, at least maybe at this time, people will claim that are underfunded or are short, because it's more difficult to appropriate now and then realize that we don't reach those revenue levels and then having to go back and put more restrictions on them. I mean, it's very difficult to, not difficult, but it's normally not a practice to go and de-appropriate once you issue appropriations out to existing programs. I mean, like you said, if you're going to plan your whole year on anticipated money and then the money doesn't come in, then what happens to the program and services? Those are the kind of concerns I like to address now, and then maybe be able to address them later on should things improve.
Sejus Maasi for that, because I remember this entire last year, testimony after testimony after testimony, entities, agencies, UOG, and other entities coming in and saying that they had been allocated an amount, it had fallen hundreds of thousands or several $1 million short by the end of the year, and it had put them in critical conditions. And so, out of consideration for them, I appreciate your expert advice that conservatively planning, and then it's always better news to receive more at the end, and it's always, we've heard from the agencies and the educational facilities that it's harder to make up hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars shortfall at the end. Sejus Maasi.
thank you. Steve, if you can go ahead and go over page 3. Thank you.
Okay, I think yesterday we ended at line 10 with the total amount of the general fund at $630,111,951. Moving on to line 11, which is beginning of the special fund revenues, the allocation by programs. Line 12, first one is Air Pollution Control Special Fund. We project a total of $162,292 for that fund. Banking, Insurance, and Enforcement Fund, we're looking at $479,765 to be realized. And then item C, the Better Public Service Fund, we estimate an amount of $1.410919 for that fund. Chamorro Land Trust Operations Fund, we anticipate to collect about $905,241. The Chamorro Land Trust Survey and Infrastructure Fund, we estimate a total collection of about $313,368. The Department of Correction Inmate Revolving Fund, we anticipate to collect $904,194. $117. The Custom and Agriculture and Quarantine Inspection Services Fund, we anticipate to collect $776. Enhanced 911 Emergency Reporting System Fund, the estimate for the fund is $2,179,996. For the Environmental Health Fund, we hope to generate approximately $1,322,570. For Fire, Life, and Medical Emergency Fund, the projection on that fund is $908,862. With Gmh Pharmaceutical Fund, total amount projected is $18,844,806. Guam Ancestral Lands Commission Survey, Infrastructure and Development Fund, the estimate is $408,553. Guam Board of Accountancy Fund is projected at $789,780. And the Guam Contractors License Board Fund is pegged at $725,252.
Are there any questions at this point on page 3? Senator Lee.
Dispensed, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate your patience with all of us. I know you're doing everything you can to try to move us forward in this process, but I just would like to give the panel members from the administration an additional opportunity to inform the body. I know that they had submitted a comparison and a revenue breakdown, and on the income tax section, we had discussed at length the corporate income taxes, but I just wanted to have, it's a new day, wanted to see if we could get a refresher on withholding interest and penalties as well. So it seems as though the request from Adelup is that we consider an increase in corporate of $2 million and an increase in withholding of $5 million. And so I just wanted to give them another opportunity to give us more information on how they came to that $5 million number, and just help me to understand.
Understood.
Thank you.
Ms. Daphne, do you have any input to provide? Do you have any update, or unless my colleagues would like, we just go ahead and proceed with the special funds, and then we'll still go back, because we still have to wrap up the whole package, okay, of the 10 pages. We can still go back to the 2 million and the 5. We're at special funds only, and you're asking something that was on page 2. We're at special funds now.
So, Mr. Chair, with that being said, then I can ask the panel here to also share their sentiments on what I quoted earlier? Okay,
Yes.
I just want to make sure
Yes.
that
Because
they're given the opportunity to chime in.
We're not
Thank you.
adopting anything. We're just moving along. Then we can go back, like what Senator yourself and Senator Teresa asked. We go back and we wrap it all up. If there's going to be any addition or subtraction, then that'll be discussed and adopted by this body. All right, so, Mr. Byrne, do you have anything you want to input on for page 3 that OFB has presented, or we're okay? All right. Okay, we will now move to page 4. Senator Tello, we're on page 3.
Yes, sir, and good morning, everyone, to my colleagues, and thank you again for being here, the administration for being here. There was a question I did have on page 3. It's regarding the CLTC Survey Infrastructure Fund. Steve, last year in this year's 2020 budget, there was nothing in that area. And now we have this new special fund and at $313,000. Can you explain this?
Senator, the fund was created this year. There was no appropriation made to the fund last year.
I see. So it's a brand new fund then that was created.
My
And it's
understanding, yes.
anticipated?
No, if I may correct that, Mr. Byrne, I think this was the fund that had money, but the money was taken out and used for some other purpose, so that's why the balance was not being able to be appropriated.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I was wondering because I didn't see it in last year's appropriation or the 2020 appropriation. Go ahead, Steve. You wanna-
This is a request actually from the Bureau of Budget, so that's why it's showing that. And I stand corrected, it's not a new fund, it is an existing fund. The only thing that whatever funds were deposited in the fund last year was kind of like
And Steve, can you?
taken out.
Okay, thank
2
you.
years.
In the letter G on
I'm sorry,
custom.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Okay.
All
Can I just get a
All right,
reiteration of
all
what
right.
Mr.
Steve, go ahead.
My understanding, the funds that were appropriated last year were either taken out or transferred out of the fund. So therefore, there was zero.
For my colleagues, 2 years ago, and Senator Reese will vouch for it, and I'm going to state it, there was money taken out Chamorro Trust and never replenished back. It's like the 911, but this one hasn't been restored. The thing was over 600,000. It was a lot of money. It zeroed it out. Last year, we didn't fund it. This year, BBMR has advised us, and that's why it exists now with more money. Hopefully, it'll grow back to where it should be, so Chamorro Land Trust can get back on their feet.
That's correct, although Chamorro Land Trust did, since early in the term of the new governor, request that that money be reimbursed, but
Oh,
it
okay.
hasn't been yet.
Even better.
It
you.
hasn't been reversed.
Senator Tello,
Okay.
you may continue, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, then in section G on the Customs and Quarantine Inspection Fund, it's showing, can you tell me what your projected revenues for that one is?
What we're projecting for the fund, Senator, is approximately $4.1 million.
Okay, and then can you tell me what the BBMR has projected for those, the administration's projections? What was their projections?
We're on the same level.
According to
Oh,
the
for projection.
printout that I received here that was updated on August 5th, the printout showing that their prediction was $3,690,748. That's a difference of $415,000. So,
In the final working session we had, they brought up their levels to the 4.1.
okay, so this is not accurate then? Okay, so let me ask BBMR that question, Steve, since you have your numbers. So Lester, my question is, what is your projected revenues for this fund that we're talking about? It's the G-
Mr. Guerrero was correct. Can you hear me?
Okay, so you agree with the 4,105,776 then, correct?
Yeah, well,
okay.
go to columns I and J. You can see that both of us were below $4 million, and then we both came up and agreed at 4.1. So columns I and J, there was a disparity. We both, after intense discussions, agreed at 4.1.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for page 3 so we can move to page 4? So far, so good. Yes, Senator Kelly, you're waving your hand. You have a question for page
Yes,
3?
if I could just have a moment to confer, because, well, I suppose it can be addressed on the next page, that's fine.
Thank you. Steve, if you continue, please, on line 1, page 4.
Okay, on line 1, we have the Guam Environmental Trust Fund. We project a $464,261 amount. The Guam Highway Fund, in total, that will amount to $22,894,794. Under the Guam Highway Fund, as I said, we need to set aside for the Better Public Service Fund an amount of $920,371. Also from the Guam Highway Fund for the Public Transit Fund, we set aside $313,020. So the total fund for the Guam Highway Fund available for distribution is $21,661,403. For the Guam Invasive Species Inspection Fund, that's projected at $610,190. For the Guam Museum Fund, projection is $409,997. The Guam Plant Inspection and Permit Fund, we estimate $98,208. The Health Professional Licensing Office Revolving Fund is $286,085. The Healthy Future Funds projected to come in at $42,748,091. The Host Community Fund is $300,000.
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Mr. Guerrero. If I could just ask that Mr. Guerrero, instead of just reading the numbers to us, if you could just explain why the decreases in these special funds, why you expect a decrease in these particular funds as you're going down.
Senator, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about, even in my introduction, and we were talking about the revenues, I did indicate that a lot of the special funds have been underperforming, not just this year, but several years back. And we just thought that considering the condition and the environment that we are experiencing now, that there's a likelihood that that trend will probably continue going into 2021. So we have this, we've taken we've made a conscientious decision to kind of relook at this, revisit it, look at the tracking, and come up with the best possible projection we can on most of these revenue accounts. And it's all based on tracking. Okay? Huh? Yeah. Okay, going on to line 13, which is the Land Survey Revolving Fund. We estimate a projection of $3,158,566. The Limited Gaming Fund is projected to bring in a $1,692,002. Manpower Development Fund is projected at $3,200,000. Office of Vital Statistics Revolving Fund.
Senator Lee, you had a question?
Mr. Chair. I just wanted to go back to item Z, the Manpower Development Fund. So if we could just talk about, I know, Mr. Guerrero, in your response to the previous speaker, you had mentioned tracking. So if you could just detail for the body what the number of workers you have tracking. I understand that the previous H2 fee was $1,000, but this body in the last term worked to increase that fee to double it. And so we know that instead of $1,000, we're collecting now $2,000 per every H2 worker that comes in. So if I could just have the number of workers and how you're tracking that, is it 1,600?
In my recent conversation with Greg Massey, who handles the Alien Labor Program over Department of Labor, he has indicated that I believe the current count is roughly about 1,200 applicants now. He does see a potential upward movement to that of maybe about 1,600 in fiscal year 2021. There is a possibility. I've asked him, is there a possibility that it exceed that? He said, there's a likelihood. It can. I mean, ranges anywhere from 1,800 to 2,000. But for now, if we're bringing in around 1,200, then I believe with the potential of maybe increasing in military construction, private construction, when we get back to some sort of normalcy, it would allow for the additional HB2 workers to come into Guam to help with the construction industry here on Guam. But the amount that we used to estimate for the 2021 Manpower Development Fund was 1,600.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Mr. Chair, if you could just let us know how you would like to move forward with this. I know that Senator Shelton and I had been working on some projections based on information that we received from Guam Department of Labor, and this is a fund that is shared between Guam Community College and GDOL. So I just wanted to know, in terms of offering amendments, how would you like that to be set up? Or should Mr. Guerrero continue with the list of special funds and then we'll go back to other ones we want to address, or?
Yes, at the end of chapter 1, we'll open it up to any amendments on any page, but we'll try to go as in order as possible. Okay, so I would go down one senator at a time and we'll just close it up. Senator Shelton, you had a question you wanted to pose
Yes.
on page 4 or so far?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, for that explanation. I also wanted to give BBMR, Mr. Carlson, the opportunity to explain your projected revenue for the Manpower Development Fund. I know you shared a little bit with us yesterday or the day before, but can you please reiterate how you came to the amount in your amended revenue?
Lester?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Shelton. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Most of the development of this revenue amount came through interaction with Greg Massey over at the Department of Labor. Mr. Massey provided some information which I actually shared with Senator Lee this morning, wherein they were optimistic about receiving 2,300 H2 workers during the upcoming year. 2,300 H2 workers times 2,000 per worker equals the $4,600,000. Initially, our amounts were a little bit below that, but upon our continued dialogue, just as OFB does, because their projection for Manpower Development Fund July 21st was only $1,498,000. Then they moved up to $3.2 million, and 3.2 kind of just is equal to 1,600 workers. Mr. Massey is, he shared that there were already about 1,600 on the ground, with 800 some already approved and in process. And we believe that with the construction, specifically the rate of construction with the military projects, that companies are going to take advantage of getting these H2 workers here, paying the fee, and thus realizing the revenue.
Thank you very much for that explanation, Mr. Carlson.
My colleagues, take note on page 4, the comments made, so when we go back, we're not all trying to come up with an answer. All right? Steve, if you can please, Madam Vice, you have a question on page 4.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we were just, Steve mentioned the limited gaming fund. And so I just wanted to know, for the previous months, from January to present, has there been a decrease in the limited gaming fund? And also if there has been a decrease for this year or an increase?
Senator, we're looking to see whether or not there's actually a decrease, but what we were looking at is just in terms of, what is it tracking? According to the tracking, the fund has actually gone down in May, for the months of May and June.
What is the difference?
For April and May, the total amount right now, based on what we have in our system, is a $174,000 decrease.
May and then June? What was June? You said May and June?
I'm sorry, I can hear you.
You mentioned May and June. So what would June's numbers be?
In May, it went down 174,000. In June, it went down $1,000. So that's the variance. You can tell 1 month it's large, and the following month can be very nominal. So what we normally do is we look at the overall trend. If it's still trending to a point that's reasonable within 5%, 7%, we'll just normally keep things at a status quo level. If we see a tremendous drop in collection that would affect, a 10, 20% difference, then we would make the adjustment accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Muñoz, you waved, and then Senator Torres, you would follow after Senator Muñoz.
Yeah, just really quickly. Steve, you mentioned in Healthy Futures Fund, you mentioned that was one of the only funds that was actually tracking very well.
Yeah.
Yes, Senator.
Can you just really quickly or briefly remind the public how this fund is actually funded very well?
Yeah, this is the tax that is applied to tobacco, alcohol, liquor that the government assesses the wholesalers a certain percentage. That percentage is deposited into the Healthy Future Fund.
Okay, wonderful. Then that means that people are still very actively participating in all of the things that's funding this fund.
Right now, it seems to be tracking well, at least it's not below. So if all indications, things for this particular fund seems to be consistent.
Very well. Good, great. Maybe we should rename it to the Unhealthy Futures Fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Or merge everybody else, right? Senator Torres first, Madam Vice, and then you'll follow. Senator Torres, you had your hand up. Ma'am, you have something you want to bring up on
Yes, I
reference
do.
to page 4?
I just want to go back to the Guam Highway Fund. As I understand it, this is on line 2. As I understand it, the Guam Highway Fund is made up of liquid fuels taxes and other taxes, such as the other fees on things like the jet fuel as well. And the June 2020 Special Fund Tracking Report shows that BBMR is tracking about $22.5 million in the Guam Highway Fund, which is $2.6 million less than what was projected, and the projection was $25.1 million. So considering the possible reduction in visitors and what I believe would be a reduction in air travel and jet fuel charges, does OFB feel that they are comfortable with increasing the Guam Highway Fund estimate by $300,000 to $22.8 million as compared to the FY2020 tracking of 22.5? I understand we're expecting tourism to pick up, but explain why you would increase it and not stick to what is arguably the track, how we're tracking in Guam Highway funds.
Yes, Senator. If you look at the current budget level in Public Law 3536, that amount is $25.1 million. Based on their tracking, without the what we call COVID adjustments, taking into account what's been happening, we're actually tracking 21.5. Yeah, but however, you got to also remember at the time, this tracking was done a couple of months ago, but since the fluctuation in gas prices over the last several months, there's 1 month that the gas prices went down 50, 60, 70 cents, which caused that particular month's revenues to drop. But since then, it's actually picked up back. So our projected revenue basically went up about 1.4 million. Still, 3 million below FY20 appropriation level. So what's in the law right now, 25.1, what we're projecting is a 22.8 million. So it's about 2.5, almost $2.8 million variance. Lower than current budget.
So what also contributes to it, you're saying, is the actual drop in fuel prices, and that has caused the variance also? And that the likelihood of a recovery of the prices should then balance it? Is that kind of one of the factors as well?
Yes, I believe it has a direct variance on the collection, depending on gas prices. As you mentioned earlier, of course, portion of this highway fund comes from jet fuel, but you also noted that because of the decline in air travel, that itself, is you could see a decrease. You can expect a decrease in that revenue collection, but in terms of actual gas prices, that's kind of like really a direct indicator of what I believe our collections would be for the fund.
But so this 300,000 increase more or less is reasonable then in your estimate? Nothing that we should be so alarmed with?
Yeah, what we also look at is, this is where tourism comes into play too, because tourism plays a big role in the overall economy in Guam. So we believe also that tourism does affect us, and that the reduction is attributed to, the reduction in tourism.
I think I'm fine, Mr. Chair. As with all things, you have good points. You brought up good points. What I'd like to do is if we take the month of June, which is already considered all the factors, all the effects that COVID has had, we are basically tracking 1.9 million. So if we just use the June numbers and project forward for a 12-month period, it'll come up to about 22 million. So I believe the 1.9, if you look at it, it might be a good indicator, because with all things considered, it might be an indicator to use as a baseline to project forward. Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Vice, and then you'll be followed by Senator Tello. Madam Vice?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Healthy Futures Fund, we have the tax from tobacco being funded through, which is one of the sources of how the Healthy Futures Fund is funded. Can we just discuss about the accountability and tax portion within the operations of the bonded warehouse? What is its functions? And in the event that we remove the bonded warehouse, how would that impact? And also, how would that impact our revenue? So that's one question. So how will the removal of the bonded warehouse impact our revenue? And then the second question would be, why have we not moved forward with the tobacco stamp tax to have better accountability of the revenue coming in from that source? So I believe that would be a question to DRT.
Thank you, Senator Nelson, for that. Regarding the bonded warehouse, so how it works, just so everybody understands, what happens is when tobacco products arrive on Guam, Customs will issue a tracer. That tracer is used as a documentation, I guess, to advise DRT that there is a container of tobacco products that's available and that we need to go and inspect. And when that happens, then again, we schedule to go out and we go to the wholesalers and we go and we inventory to make sure that those products that go in are accounted for. Now, the trigger for the tobacco tax, as it is the regular cigarette tax, the tobacco tax, to be paid is when those tobacco products get pulled out of the bonded. And it isn't a government bonded warehouse, it is a privately housed bonded warehouse. And, of course, Rev and Tax does have the keys for those so that really those are secure, and the wholesalers themselves cannot access the warehouses without DRT. And so, when those products are taken out of the bonded, then that's when that's the trigger for those taxes to be paid. Regarding the cigarette stamp tax, which, of course, I think was enacted back in, I'm not sure, 2015 or something around that time. My understanding, and we actually have had to meet with the AG's office maybe just 2 or 3 weeks ago regarding this matter. We actually brought to their attention since last year, probably around October, that the way that it appears on the books is that there's 2 taxes to go back to it. My understanding, and I was not at DRT at the time, but my understanding based on the AG's office, talked with them, but also with my team, that the original when it was implemented or mandated, that the cigarette stamp tax wasn't implemented due to funding. That was my understanding. Now, of course, we came in this last year and we began to discuss this issue with the AG's office. And in the last year, when we had actually inquired with the AG's office on something that was brought up by our team, which we believe needs to be clarified, which is the fact that there's actually 2 taxes that's on the books for cigarettes, and that's the cigarette stamp tax and then the current, I guess, what we call cigarette tax, because if you look at the actual collections, I think the Special Revenue Fund calls it the cigarette tax. So we did last year request for the AG to weigh in on the fact, or whether or not there's really the 2 taxes that exist simultaneously, and if that's something that we're supposed to be implementing simultaneously. And I know the speaker did, I think, back in October, and then again recently. I know there was a bill that was introduced, but she did last October write to the Department of Revenue and Taxation regarding that. And some of course, the concern we have is, one, whether or not there's the 2 that simultaneously should be taxed, and if that's the way that it should be done, then that's something. Then of course, one, I think that there was always the question as to whether there should be double taxation on the same product, and I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the intent of the law and what the legislature had intended back in 2015, but we just wanted to clarify with the AG's office that our interpretation of the law, which is that there's 2 taxes on the same product, is correct. And I did communicate with the AG's office on that. We were waiting on their response. Again, we met with them like 3 weeks ago. I did follow up with them, and we were expecting, if we don't already have it, we're expecting a response from them very soon, and I will follow up again with them. So that was one of the main issues or concerns that we had about the cigarette stamp tax. The other thing is, of course, I know there is a bill that was introduced, and I'm not here to weigh in on the bill, but we did provide back in October some comments on the language of the bill. We provided that to our speaker's office. We did have several comments regarding the language on the bill and recommendations for perhaps there to be adjustment. But again, I think that the very first item which we mentioned in our transmittal back in October 2019, when we did respond on the language, was that the clarification of the 2 taxes and what really needs to be done.
Thank you, Daphne. So is there a timeline on when we will know about the clarification on the 2 separate taxes?
Absolutely, Senator. So I did, I was advised by the AG's office in the last week that we would have expected it in the last week or so, but I followed up again this week, and I will follow up with them. I know that the AG's office has a lot going on, so I will follow up with them. If we haven't already received it, I'll make sure that if we follow up and we get that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one more question. When DRT goes to do the count, is Customs and Quarantine on site? Is there any reconciliation done between the manifests? between DRT and Customs and Quarantine, or they operate completely separate of one another?
You know, I've actually, during this pandemic, because of course I was worried about our team, and I know we were worried about, you know, the health and safety of our people, I actually had gone out with my team to make sure, well, one, that, you know, we had mechanisms in place to keep our people safe, and frankly, you know, the way I operate is I will not let my team do something that I'm not also willing to do. So when we had to go out, I did go out with them. Customs was not there with us. I don't know if they are. That's something that I can check on. But I do know that we do receive a tracer, and I am not sure what's involved in the tracer. I just know that we get an advisement that there is a shipment. We do also get probably the inventory count as well. I think what we do is we do the count and we compare it against what, I don't know if it's the manifest or what other inventory document, but there is some level of reconciliation is my understanding, ma'am. But again, I don't know how customs plays into that.
Okay, and so every time that they want to open the warehouse, there's a representative from DRT present?
Absolutely. So how it works, Senator Nelson, is that the key, the wholesalers cannot open the bonded without us. We actually have the key for that bonded warehouse. Anytime that they are going to put anything in the bonded warehouse or take it out, a representative from DRT has to be there. We have the keys for those.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Speaker?
I just have a follow-up to that question, Ms. Daphne. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I just want to ask if can we safely say that based on that we are collecting 100% of the taxes for tobacco? And if not, share with me why.
I mean, you know, I think, well, one, we can't weigh in on any taxpayer situation in particular, but definitely there's mechanisms in place to make sure that we're accounting for those products that are taken out of bonded. You know, of course, there are exceptions to the taxes, and so, like, for example, any exports is not, you know, subject to tax, right? So if there are exports, but again, you know, the trigger is really the tracer that we get from customs. That's in terms of when the shipments come in. And then, you know, the reality is that the wholesalers, I mean, as far as I know, and again, I have gone to do bonded myself with the team at times, you know, just very kind of surface done it, but you know, we have the key for the bonded warehouse. So, you know, as far as I understand it, there shouldn't be an opportunity for them to pull it out without us knowing and without us having to account for all of the products that's pulled out. So the difference between the cigarette tax and then a regular GRT, right? GRT is based on a sale. So you actually have to have a sale, and that's the trigger for the sale that's going to be the monies that's subject to a gross receipts tax. The trigger for the cigarette tax is the pulling out of bonded. Now, when that's pulled out of bonded, that's when the wholesalers pay the taxes on that, right? It's not based on their sale, it's when they pull it out. So they could pull it out and have to, and that's why it's also important that even if they're going to transfer it from perhaps one location to another, that we're also involved. So, you know, I mean, in terms of mechanisms to make sure that those, you know, what's put into bonded and what's pulled out of bonded, you know, we have the key for the bonded warehouses. And so I guess in that sense, we are the ones that hold, you know, have the ability to make sure that those are accounted for, what goes in and what goes out.
So you are saying that we are collecting 100% of all the tobacco taxes?
I mean, in terms of, so again, it's the trigger. We've actually tried to do reconciliation to make sure that we're, you know, accounting for those that are taken out. And yeah, of course, we always do our best to collect all the taxes that is due to us, Madam Speaker. How it works is it's similar to GRT in the sense of the filing. So, you know, for example, all of the product that's pulled out for the month of July will be reported and filed on the BPT form in August 20 at the latest, right? And so, you know, again, we collect those and we receive those, and of course, you know, we've done our best to reconcile the records against that. So, you know, our goal is always to collect 100% of all the taxes that it's due to Guam on every area, including tobacco.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say, that if the bonded warehouse system works, I guess what happened to the loss, I think if I can remember correctly, we had like $16 million lost previously from the taxes on tobacco, and that was based on an audit report. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that and seeing is this mechanism 100% proof?
Well, I can't speak on any specific taxpayer, and I'm not sure of the audit report that might have referenced that particular tax or outstanding tax or tax due. But what I can say is that we do have our people out there, and again, you know, if you think about the system, well, one, you know, I think if you think about the system itself, again, the reason why that DRT is the I guess the key master for the bonded warehouse is so that there is, you know, that check that whatever product goes in and out of there is accounted for, again, because the trigger for the tax on tobacco is really the pulling out of the bonded. So, you know, if there are challenges with collections or other things, you know, that's something, again, I'm not sure about I can't speak on any specific taxpayer, you know, of course, because taxpayers have rights, but I can say, you know, that on the DRT side, we do our best to make sure that we account for it all. There is no perfect system, right? I mean, we do our best, but we're human beings, and, but, you know, I'm proud of what our team has done, and I'm proud of, you know, I think the fact that we've done our best to make sure that there's credibility in the system. You know, I have confidence in our regulatory group. They're the group that not only does bonded, but they're the group that also has worked on bed and breakfast, on, you know, doing our best to do regulation on that area. And they're going to be the same group that's going to also do the regulatory work for, you know, our recreational cannabis once that goes into place. So, you know, for me, I work very closely with that group, and I feel very confident in them. Again, you know, it's not a perfect system. But you know what, if there are taxes that are outstanding, and we find that there are, we do, of course, work to do collections on those.
Thank you, Ms. Daphne. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Follow-up.
Madam Vice, you had a question?
Yes, just a
follow-up
follow-up.
maybe on to that?
Yes, just a follow-up, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Right.
What prevents the government from being able to account and tax at the point of, I guess at the port, the tobacco that comes in, what prevents the government from doing that?
Oh, thanks, Senator Nelson. That actually, so it's the law, right? The law is, the law allows for the bonded, and the bonded process is such that at the time the shipment comes in, you know, of course, the process is, again, as I mentioned, the tracer, and we get it. And the trigger, again, is really the pulling out of the bonded, not the landing on the port.
So if we remove that portion of the law, what would the government, so you're saying it's just the law, so if we remove the portion of that law, then the government will be able to tax at the port? You know, and it would have to be, again, I don't know exactly. I suppose if the bonded is repealed, then there would also have to be language that indicates what would the trigger then be for the tax on that particular product, whether it's going to be at the port or not. And then there will also have to be perhaps some language on how that would operate in the CQA side, I guess, and how, if any interaction with DRT was going to happen, then how that would work. And that's something, I mean, again, I think that the public auditor did issue an audit where he referenced the bonded. But again, you know, I think that if that were going to happen, then perhaps there would be a little bit more kind of detailed look at what the process would be to make sure that it would be a good process too. Okay, so I'm just thinking if there's already a process in place, and you, from your explanation, sounds like DRT has a very good handle on this process, that if we just shift location and do it on site, the process would be very similar for the tax collection. The only thing is that you won't have to send an agent every time they need to remove, or any time a distributor needs to remove tobacco product. You do it right there at the port.
Right. Well, so recently, and I just want to share maybe some experience from some information that I have from when I was able to, travel to our DRT and CQA to the north of us in CNMI to see the system that they have. And so they do have, and I know here locally at the CQA side, there's been some desire, and excuse me, I know, I can't speak on behalf of Director Pareto or on behalf of Acting Director Mendiola, but my understanding based on, our discussions with CQA locally is that there is a need for some type of a system, a computerized system, so that way they can make sure that, they can capture, like, for example, we deal with them on the use tax issue. And what happened with the use tax is at some point many, the way that the law is written is that the use tax, actually the collections piece for the use tax, or the agency that's really the collection agent for the use tax is really Customs. But what has happened is that, we actually, and in the CNMI, there is a bit of a different structure in terms of finance. So in the CNMI, there is a finance department, and under finance, there's the rev and tax, there's the treasurer, there's accounting, there's also Customs. In the CNMI, how it works is the Customs, because they fall under finance, they're also collection agents. So in the CNMI, they're actually able to collect, not what they call use tax, like I guess it's our equivalent of use tax, but it's excise tax. So the CNMI Customs agents actually serve as collection agents. Here on Guam, we find for the use tax, what has happened is, we have this form UST, which is the use tax form. So when a product, God bless you, when a product comes in, what happens is a use tax form is generated, and that use tax form, the way that the use tax law reads is that even the use tax itself is not actually collectible, or the law doesn't require that use tax gets paid at the point of a product coming into Guam. The use tax actually is due on the 20th of the following month, just like GRT. So what we've found is that, and of course I came in this last year and found that we have boxes of use tax forms that, of course, that we've received and that we're working to collect on. So there is, I guess, a bit of a challenge due to the fact that there isn't some type of a computerized system. Now, I think that if, of course, and I know Customs has been working on something, and, I think that that's going to be very critical in making sure that any type of change, is going to be successful. But yeah, I mean, to go back to the issue of the bonded, if that bonded is repealed, and then of course there's a taxation at the point of entry, then of course Customs would be very heavily involved, and DRT as well to some point. But there really has to be some discussion again on, and I think even perhaps some review of the use tax process, and also how the use tax, I think that we could learn from, kind of the challenges that we have with the use tax. And that will be critical because, again, what we will not want to have happen is perhaps the same challenges that we have with the use tax, where we're trying to collect on many years' worth of it, and to no fault of, the Customs group, because I know, they have their own charge, and their charge is really, a lot focused on public safety. And again, we don't have the same structure like in CNMI, where Customs are actually, because they're integrated with the Rev and Tax Authority to some degree, they're actually collection agents, and they can actually see how much taxes people owe in terms of the excise tax, and they can collect on it. And that's a bit of, I think, a limitation on Guam, because Customs agents here are actually not collection agents, even though the law states that the Customs and Quarantine Group is really the group that is required to collect the use tax.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that thorough answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tello, you had your hand up, I think, and you're followed by Senator Muñoz, and then I see Senator Therese. You had your hand up? Okay, after.
Just Masi, Mr. Chair. Steve, can you tell, I'm sorry to go back to the Guam Highway Fund, but I wanted to get my numbers correct here. Can you tell me after, for FY2020, after the Better Service Fund was taken out and Public Transit Fund by law that was taken out, how much money was appropriated out of the Guam Highway Fund? 2020.
23.9 million.
23.9 million. Okay. 23.9 million. Okay. So there is that reduction, of $2 million reduction, and it's both agreed upon. Okay, thank you. I just want to get my numbers straight on that one. The other question I have is on the Public School Library Resource Fund. I'm noticing there's a 23,507 increase from 2020. And I know that you're attributing any kind of increases and decreases based on the tracking. Can you kind of explain where this money comes from for this fund?
Yes, Senator. I also, going back to my initial statement regarding the special funds in the beginning, I did indicate that, one thing about these special funds, they're very specific in its source of funding.
Yeah.
So if we look at the tracking and see that a particular fund is not going to be affected, basically with what's been going on, and the tracking is still showing achievable tracking from what we have budgeted, we would normally just go ahead and continue that tracking, because unless we know of any adverse conditions that would affect the collection of that, we would just either keep it status quo or maybe increase it, just depending on the tracking.
Okay. So to my question, at what funds this account?
Are you asking how the fees are generated?
Yes.
Yeah, 50% comes from passport fees. And any other library fees that are being assessed at the libraries. That is the source of funding for the fund.
Currently, our libraries are all closed, right? Correct? Currently, our libraries are all closed and have been closed since March, correct?
Yes.
So this is generated from 50% from passport fees, and then the remaining is coming from fees at the library, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you're still anticipating a $23,000 increase in this particular fund?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator, just keep in mind, the fees that come from the library are very nominal, but it is a source of fund for the fund. So basically, the passports is where we're looking at.
Yeah, my only concern here too, Mr. Chair, is that, we're seeing it today that we're having to subsidize some of these special funds, that pays for other areas. And we don't want to get in that predicament, for the FY21 budget. We're having to use general fund to subsidize this. So I think caution is, if the opportunity to decrease anything in these special funds, is this the opportunity that we do it, or do we wait till after we finish? Because, Mr. Chair, I know it's very small, but every penny counts in this government. And we just saw that this particular fund that is supported by passport fees, which we know nothing's moving, and library fees, which have been closed since March. And yet there's an increase in this. That's my concern.
Well, if you look at, Senator, if you look at the last 3 years, is actually what we're recommending is lower than the average of the last 3 years.
But to 2020, you had it. It's higher than 2020.
The average of the last 3 years.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that your appropriation here is $23,000 more than 2020, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And these are one of the funds. Remember, I told you one of the methods. We use historical data. We use some of the years' average. We use a 3-year, 5-year trend of what the fund is looking at. So whatever we feel is most advantageous for the government, conservative, a little bit optimistic, but not totally unrealistic.
And does this count, Mr. Chair, this particular account, what does it pay for in the government of Guam? The operations of the library? Is that what this funding covers?
Are you referring to the passport funds?
Well, according to Steve, how this fund collects revenue is by 50% of the passport fees he mentioned, and then the other 15% from library fees and costs. That generates into this account. So my question is, now that we know how the money is put into this account, what is used from this account to spend for our government? Is it used to cover the library operations? Right, Steve?
Yes, it is, Senator.
Okay, so maybe there's a wash here because the library is not open, but it's a concern I have.
When you say that because the library is not open, Senator, I would just be reminded, the DOE benefits from this fund. Even when the school is closed, they're still in preparation for the next school year. So you don't have to be open to fund a program that needs to get ready to function when it's time to function. And I understand where you're coming from.
You know what I'm saying, Mr. Chair. I don't want to give any false hope here that we're appropriating this amount out of a special fund, making a prediction.
Yes, understood.
When it's obvious, that I mean, we have to be cautious on this, so especially because I'm concerned about
yes.
it.
Understood.
Okay,
so noted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My colleagues, in the Google Drive, when you're asking for comparison with the previous years, it's in your computer. You can pull it up so that when you ask the question, it's pretty much already answered. Just turn to it. If you want Steve to give you the answer that you have in your hands, then I can understand. You're having problems with your computer. But other than that, Senator Muñoz, do you have any questions you wanted to bring up?
Thank you again for giving me another opportunity here. I just thought of a couple other questions. Steve, I mean, it's safe to assume, right, that as long as bars are closed, right, the consumption of alcohol will more than likely go down. So do you think that the closure of the bars will affect the Healthy Futures Fund at all?
It can to a certain point, depending on how long the duration of the closure is. Bars contribute to the Healthy Future Fund. And, I believe if you take the total count of bars on Guam, I don't have that particular percentage of what they represent in the total scheme of things. But if the duration continues, I'm sure it will have an effect on the collections. Okay.
It's kind of like the same question that Senator Taitigui was asking. The closure of certain things could affect the amounts, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the reason why I asked that question. I'm sure it wouldn't deter someone from wanting to drink, that not having to go to a bar will actually stop them from doing it. But I mean, it's just a question I wanted to ask if you factored that into as well. Just like the alcohol taxes are deposited into the Healthy Futures Fund, there's a bill, 298. Now, if that becomes a law, alcohol taxes will be credited to pay for the Harmon Industrial Park project. So did we factor that into the calculation of this Healthy Futures Fund as well?
No, it wasn't, Senator.
Okay. Maybe something that we might want to look into as well. Okay.
Well, but the only what it would cause, Senator, is that if I was supposed to consider all pending bills and the source and the appropriation and the sources they would be tapping, it would affect the development of the 2021 budget. So as long as these are not mandated, they're not passed into law, we did not consider those potential appropriations, because there will be no way for me to kind of like even balance the appropriation as we go by if I keep considering or even assume some of these bills would even get passed. So no, the question to your answer, it wasn't considered.
Okay, just something to consider, because I see it's appropriated already dollar for dollar in the entire 42 million. So there are going to be some things that you've appropriated this money to that will be affected if that happens, if that becomes law. So just something to consider. Okay, thank you.
Understood. So noted. Senator Muñoz, bills coming our way, we would make sure we cap it when it gets to the floor. Senator Therese, you had a question, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the special funds amounts that we're looking at have been based on receipts over the years, so not just a single year, but several years of what they've actually received, and especially those that are underperforming. a majority of the special funds that we're looking at, you have estimated their receipts to be less than what we predicted for FY 2020, almost all of them with a few exceptions. And so in addition to the multi-year trajectory that you looked at, you also looked at the COVID impacts, for example, which types of businesses close and things like that. That's what you just finished saying, that's correct?
Yes.
Okay, so most of them are decreased. I mean, of course, very concerning, the customs, 9 million decrease that you predicted. And then the pharmaceutical fund, you predict also a decrease from FY 2020. Can you, and we know that the customs is decreased because of the flights. They get paid, their fees are based on passengers. But the pharmaceuticals fund, can you just explain the decrease there? 646,000.
Yes, Senator. Remember, the source of the pharmaceutical funds comes from the BBT. So
It's pardon?
it comes from the BBT.
Okay, yes.
So whatever the total BBT amount is, we take out 6.19%, and that's automatically set aside for the pharmaceutical. So it's a set amount. It's not something that we project or anything like that. It's by law.
But so if you projecting less BPT than FY 2020, that's why you reduced the pharmaceutical amount here.
You're correct, Senator.
All right, and I want to note that almost all of your, well, let me get to that after, sorry, I'll get to that question next. But, and then of course we talked at length about the highway fund. That's very concerning because it seems to me that we're taking away the, any progress we might have been making on finishing additional roads. Yeah, it's about $3 million that they estimate every year for the additional roads that they could work on. But, and then you have an increase in the Manpower Development Fund, which my colleague talked about, and then one more is, of course, the TAF. But most of these, I want to note, according to the spreadsheet you gave us, BBMR was in agreement, except for the Manpower Development Fund and except for that one. It looks like, right? And so I just wanted to ask BBMR, if they're still on the line, after the July 2020 report or, numbers came in, do you still agree with everything except for the Manpower Development Fund and the special funds?
Lester, are you still there?
Yes, we still agree, ma'am.
All right, okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Steve, if you would now, Senator Moylan, you have a question for page 4 up to number 16?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Please.
On our highway fund, our special fund for the Guam Highway Fund, I'd just like to ask, maybe it should be directed to DOA. For the special fund, have we used the funding for anything other than the special fund purpose for FY20?
Senator, the Guam Highway Fund is appropriated over several different categories, and DOA has followed those categories during the course of this year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burns. So in other words, we haven't used it other than for the category purpose that this special fund was put together for?
No, sir.
Thank you. And then also, Mr. Chair, one other question regarding the next one on Guam Invasive Species Inspection Fund for Mr. Guerrero there. If you can explain of course, the funding, where this funding does come from, and then the lack of performance of this funding, please.
This is beyond 16, correct?
Letter Q, item 6. Guam Invasive Species Inspection Fund.
Oh, okay, line 6Q. Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, these are the fees that are collected whenever conservation officer from Department of Agriculture goes out and do their inspections. So whatever fees are collected from the services they provide are deposited into this fund. This fund is also specifically, to my knowledge, only to be used for Department of Agriculture.
Is this fund also supported by the shipping lines and the containers that come in? In other words, the cost per container.
Yeah, what it is that the inspectors will go out and inspect the containers that are brought into Guam. But I don't think it's basically, they generate any fees from the container itself, like, you know, the taxes that they pay, rather than the fees that they charge to do the service of the inspection.
All right, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We will now move to line, Senator Sabina, you have a question for page 4 up to line 16.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a follow-up question for Daphne. So in regards to collections for the bonded warehouse, does your team reconcile what's taken out with what we receive in BPT? And what is the capacity to do that?
Thank you, Senator Perez. And thank you to, I guess, Vice Speaker Nelson also for bringing up the issue of the bonded. Of course we do, it's our BPT group, our Business Privilege Tax Group, that's charged with ensuring that the bonded is done. But we do bonded with, our BPT group works in conjunction with regulatory. So anytime that we have, of course, people who anytime our team has to go out to do bonded, we have a BPT person and a regulatory person. And you're right, ma'am, that, of course, there is, there are records that are generated, which, of course, because we have our inventory versus the inventory that, that is provided, which, of course, that's what we have to make sure. We have to make sure that whatever goes in ties with what, with what the wholesaler says and whatever comes out as well, so that when the filing of the BPT or the GRT form happens in the following month, that there is a mechanism for us to reconcile. Now, of course, any taxes and in tax administration, what we know is that it's voluntary compliance, right? And if, for example, not just wholesalers, but if anybody, even on income tax side, we cannot force people to file a return. Returns are filed, they're supposed to be filed, and they're filed by law, not just, again, GRT, but also any type of form, income tax. But really in tax administration, we know is that there's voluntary compliance. And so, but the BPT forms or the GRT forms are due on the 20th of the month. Now, our team, as you know, and you mentioned the other day, we are behind in the processing of our BPT returns. And that was something that was brought up by a public auditor's report, I think back in 2019, when he did the audit of limited gaming, right? Because the same group that processes BPT also processes limited gaming, also is in charge of use tax collection, and also is in charge of making sure that we do bonded. And, we do have, of course, I think across the board, all agencies are challenged with resources. Not just human resources in general, like outside of the pandemic, right? Of course, we already had challenges, but now given this pandemic, we're not only just trying to take care of our usual jobs, but also making sure that we man our doors and make sure that we're doing social distancing. And in fact, just so the body is aware, we even in this week have had to implement even stricter measures because of the surges that we're seeing. And as you know, we're a very high traffic agency. We recently had to move our driver's license back to Barragata because of some challenges that we had with our prior space at our satellite office. So, in terms of the capacity for us to focus 100% on any particular job is very challenging. Most especially I think in our BPT group, all of our groups have some challenge, but our BPT group, we actually have, if you look at our staffing pattern, a lot of our people are detailed. We don't have the number of BPT positions, and I don't think we ever have, that is probably needed in order to be able to properly run that group. What we did in this past, hiring cycle was I talked with my team about perhaps converting a position from one area where, we believe that the need wasn't as much in terms of a head count into a BPT head count. And I'm actually hoping that we're able to maybe squeeze 2 people from that one position into, one person out of that, one position out of that group to 2 people in BPT. But it is a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge all around to try to get things done. So I mean, in terms of our capacity, you know, when we have had to focus on it, for example, when we have had to do reconciliations, we did, you know, of course, may look at certain industries, things like that. Those are things that our team will set aside, you know, time to do. But then it takes away from some of the other things that we're doing. And as I mentioned yesterday, we actually just started doing overtime so that we can begin to get caught up with, you know, a lot of the BPT forms that, you know, are yet to be processed. So it is a challenge to get things processed. Our team, though, is always willing to, you know, when there's a need to focus on a certain effort because it's urgent, to make sure we reallocate resources. But, you know, I learned from some of my federal counterparts, you know, if something's number 1, something has to be number 2. And so when we focus our efforts on one thing, then we may have to ease up on something else until we can get that done and refocus again.
Thank you for that answer. And just to, you know, let you know that I've introduced a bill to kind of provide some sort of relief in that aspect, along with some of my colleagues here. So I do hope to, you know, look forward to your input on that one. Thank you. So if I can ask another question.
Sure.
This is for, I don't know, I guess it's for Lester Carlson regarding the indirect cost fund. So I understand that if this is correct, if my understanding is correct, that this is coming from the federal funds as far as adjusting the indirect cost ratio. Has that been ever reevaluated recently? And what is the status of that?
It's formulaic in its amount, and annually we do a recertification at the request of the federal government. And there's only a few agencies that receive indirect cost fund allocations by virtue of the agreement we have with the federal government.
So it's annually evaluated, is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, there's an annual letter that comes out. We review it, make recommendations, and then the governor signs off on it. It's kind of like a grant, if you want to look at it in that respect.
Okay, so is there a capacity to use that for procurement? I mean, because considering that, you know, with the money comes more perhaps potential to purchase things, procure things. Has that ever been utilized for procurement purposes?
Mr. Byrne can help me out on this, but I'm pretty sure we almost exclusively use it for personnel. And the reason for that is because of all the federal grants and federal agency interactions that are requiring a Guam counterpart. They assist us in being able to offset those costs with these funds. And Mr. Byrne, if I misspoke on that, you're certainly welcome to correct me.
No, sir, you're correct.
Has there been any consideration to utilize it for procurement training? Because, you know, with the funds, there's going to be, you know, cascading purchases. I'm wondering if has ever been considered to utilize it for personnel to do procurement.
The people that are funded under the indirect cost fund, Senator, if, say, an agency has 2 or 3 people that are funded, that's their primary responsibility. So if there's a training that's available, it is probably incumbent upon them to attend the training. So I think it's part and parcel to their job responsibilities because they're funded from that fund source.
But so basically, there's no intent to use it for those purposes. It just kind of there's an assumption that the agencies are already going to cover it, or has that ever been?
Yeah, I can't speak for the other agencies, but we do get some indirect cost fund money. And if there's a procurement module, if there is anything with respect to procurement, particularly on the federal side as it relates to grants and things of that nature, grants administration, my people certainly are first and foremost, to sign up for these opportunities. So,
What you're
to
saying
interact
is,
with and be in grants management, so to say.
so what you're saying is the money stays within BBMR. It's not shared. It's not a shared resource for the other agencies. Is that correct?
Oh, and that's by statute or agreement. So it's again, Mr. Byrne can help me out here, but
Senator, within DOA, the indirect cost fund
the indirect
is
cost
generally
fund.
used.
Edward, is that correct?
Yes, within DOA, for instance, the indirect cost fund is used to pay for the salaries and benefits of those people that actually do handle federal transactions, such as the payroll staff who are paying federally funded employees and the accounting staff who are dealing with the federal funds movement. So those funds are generally need to be used to support those personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Folks, we are at line 16. Reminder, you do have it in your Google Drive, the comparison. We will be allowed to go back to these other pages to discuss it further. Okay? Stephen, if you could close up page 4, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are on line 16, Office of Vital Statistics Revolving Fund, projected to come in at $241,442. Pesticide Management Fund is projected at $94,989. Police Patrol Vehicle and Equipment Revolving Fund projected is $329,366. Police Services Fund is projected at $989,915. Professional Engineers, Architect, and Land Surveys Revolving Fund is projected at $288,182. Public Recreation Services Fund projected at $116,456. Public School Library Resources Fund projected at $915,082. Public Transit Fund, $313,020. Rabies Prevention Fund, $44,610. Recycling Revolving Fund, $2,865,523. And Safe Street Fund at $168,061.
My colleagues, we have completed page 4. We will recess until 2 p.m. Thank you.